Good afternoon and welcome back. We invite you to take your seat and we'll start our final panel for the day. Feel free to grab a cup of coffee. There might still be dessert out, but please take a seat and we'll get started. I want to start by thanking Ivan and Laura and our, what we like to call most knowledgeable persons, MKPs, who were here on our panel today to have these interesting discussions we've had so far, 3, and this is the 4th. We've heard a lot today on terms of setting the stage and the facts and the targets and the headwinds, and we've heard about reliability and that we are mid-transition in our energy transition. We've heard about affordability. Many of the words that we continue to hear and the ideas were about wanting a plan, wanting to collaborate, wanting transparency and coordination and balancing and being agile enough to be able to change and to recalibrate. And so this transition really has been both optimistic, ambitious, and challenging. So in our 4th panel today, what we'll be talking about is what was embedded throughout the other panels, and that is we're going to discuss California's economy and how energy policies, as you've heard throughout the day, can most effectively promote economic growth and a carbon neutral future. How do we take this energy transition and also remember that it is meant to cause economic growth to get to that carbon neutral place? I'm excited to be joined in this discussion by these leaders, Lorena Gonzalez-Fletcher, Lance Hastings, and Ana Matasantos. And I'll give a brief introduction of their backgrounds, but please note more information is on your tables and also if you go to the PPIC website. But if I spent my time discussing their backgrounds, our hour would be done. So Lorena Gonzalez-Fletcher is president of the California Federation of Labor Unions, AFL-CIO, the first woman and first person of color to serve as the chief officer of the AFL-CIO. She was sworn in July 27, 2022. She's recognizable because prior to this role, Lorena served for nearly a decade as an assembly member, where she focused on many issues, too much to list here. I'll only really mention 2, and that is she passed AB 5, and if you don't know what that is, go read the numerous cases on AB 5. And also, she has fought and focused on California's working and middle class, including with legislation to allow all Californians the ability to earn paid sick leave. Lance Hastings is president and CEO of the California Manufacturers and Technology Association, CMTA. And under his leadership, CMTA passed historic legislation with broad bipartisan support to provide a sales tax exemption for manufacturing equipment. Before leading CMTA, he served as Miller Coors Vice President of National Affairs and was previously the Vice President of Government Relations at the California Grocers Association and Senior Director for State Affairs at the Grocery Manufacturers of America. Ana Matasantos is a managing director and partner with Boston Consulting Group. Previously, she served as cabinet secretary in the office of Governor Newsom. And prior to that, she was a budget and policy consultant focusing primarily on issues relating to the state budget, education finance, healthcare, and income inequality in local government. She was the California Director of Finance in both Governors Brown and Schwarzenegger's administrations, helping the state navigate the impact of the Great Recession. We're really fortunate to have this panel. I thank them for their service. Let's give them a round of applause. I'm going to start, Lorena, with you first. There are a number of important benefits from the energy transition, but it also involves trade-offs, such as potential workforce disruptions, which I know you know so much about. How can state leaders best address and plan for these trade-offs in ways that both benefit and protect our state labor force?
I think there's two things. There's an assumption in that question that I think I need to address, and I will start by saying and admitting I probably voted for every bill that went through the legislature to get us off of fossil fuels. I was very much and am very supportive in a kind of transition to a new energy economy. That being said, I think that the legislature, myself included, rushed this idea, right? And so we kind of have that balance with existing jobs, and there are existing good middle-class jobs, specifically in fossil fuels, our refineries. And while we have aspirations of getting to a carbon neutral society, we also have to be realistic about what exists today. So one of the things I don't think we did a good job at is saying, like, we actually are going to use oil for a while. You know, that's just a reality. We have gas cars. Why are we rushing? And in fact, when we use California oil, we refine it here, it is the cleanest. It is utilizing the best labor standards in the world, and it doesn't have to be tanked in from a different country, right? And so I think when we first started through this, we wanted to get there, right? We pushed to get there without really looking at the consequences, not just on the fact that if we don't refine it in California, we're going to have to bring it in. It's going to be a lot more expensive. It's going to be dirtier, and the labor standards aren't as good. And we started talking about this just transition for workers. Now, what we're facing is refineries shutting down and those workers not being transitioned and instead just being laid off. That's problematic. So while we try to kind of course correct, and I'm hopeful that we will course correct on California refineries and get some of those jobs back, we have to look at how do we age out the workforce that's there now? Because I'm going to be honest, when you have a 55-year-old refinery worker, we're not reskilling them for something. And the truth is that they can stay in their job if we do this correctly until they retire. But then creating a new workforce within renewable energy that also is a workforce that will create good middle-class jobs. A workforce that, you know, as we often say, you can go through an apprenticeship, that you don't take on student debt, you're actually starting to make money, and you create the ability to forward yourself into a middle-class career, and that's what we're looking for. So the combination of California being realistic about our energy future, but also as we transition to renewables, ensuring that the same kind of standards that we've had in the fossil fuel industry, and that means collective bargaining agreements, joint labor management apprenticeship programs, healthcare, retirement, that's available to the next generation of workers.
Thank you. I think in your answer, too, I really appreciate that you seem to have really encapsulated a lot of what our panelists were able to reference. But you really made it come alive with the idea of the worker who is in a fossil fuel industry, who is of a certain age, and the whole transition to and the anticipation of a robust economy, which is one of the things we've had a lot of discussion about in terms of affordability here. So I thank you for that answer. Lance, I have two questions for you. The first is, how is the energy transition and some of the costs and challenges associated with it, how is it affecting manufacturers in our state? And I'll hold my second question.
Okay. Thanks, I can't keep track, so thank you very much. And thanks to PPIC for having us, but also this discussion through the course of the morning and the early afternoon. And I'm going to start answering the question by saying simply, once upon a time. Once upon a time in California, it was the land of opportunity, the Golden State. It's where you came to achieve things. And things came relatively easily because of the attraction of people that came to the state. I'm speaking primarily of the post-World War II environment where service members were returning from all over the world here to start again. So California hasn't always been the powerhouse manufacturing sector that we are today. It took a lot of work to get here, and now we have 40 million people, a great workforce, a great basis of manufacturing, that we are the #1 manufacturing state in the country. So when energy comes into the equation, that is our, depends if it's labor or energy, the most important cost components of making things. And something I also like to say about manufacturing is we make all the things. That's what we do. And we're pretty good at it. And we're the ones who know best how to make all the things. In making things, there are processes involved that include emissions and great consumption of energy, electricity, natural gas, etc. So for us, it is a disruptive transition that we're willing to undertake. And this morning there was a lot of discussion about ambition. Ambition is really important, but that's what starts things. And when I hear about ambitious goals, I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's the ambition to get towards a cleaner future that we're all signed up for. And I think every panelist even said that. But how we get there and when we get there are critically important. And I would have loved to be a fly on the wall when AB 32 was passed and they pegged a few dates, 2020, 2030, and then other dates came after that, 2045. Based on what? I really would like to know. Because if there was science that supported that, there's your answer. But if it was a round number that looks good, I'm wondering why it isn't 2048, September 3rd of 2048. Why isn't that the date? Because we simply don't know. So what we're left with is this ambition to get there, and it's going to be very, very costly to get there. So what we're trying to do in the manufacturing sector is hold on to the great jobs that we have, the great intellectual property opportunities that are here, our great university system that supplies the workforce, and the great high school system that supplies the workforce. Because after all, you don't need that 4-year degree to come into the manufacturing sector. You might if you're an engineer, but you can learn a lot of things while working on the job in manufacturing. So we feel like we're at the junction, I think, really, of what the future looks like because of our sector. And I wanted to address the notion of California being the 4th largest economy in the world. The reason that we are is because of the strong manufacturing base. Full stop. Without manufacturing sector, you don't have an economy. So we're the 4th largest. That's great. We have a tremendously high budget deficit with our state government. That's a paradox, and one that needs to be resolved, because we can't at one hand say how great we are when you struggle every single year over billions of dollars of a deficit that fully outstrip most other states' complete and total budgets all in. So we've got to get that fixed. And one way that I'd like to see us get that fixed is look how we finance government and all of the ambitions that we have, because it's based on a 1930s model. The way we finance state government and local government in California is based on the 1930s. I challenge anyone in this room to show me what in California looks today like it looked in the 1930s, because you can't. Our population is more diverse and effective. Our university systems are better, but we're still using that old style system. So with that, kind of as a wrap up, I know I'm going on a little bit long for the first question. We're at the crosshairs and we feel it, we know it, we understand it, and we accept it. That ambition to get there, but we have to get there together and without penalty and being told what to do and when to do it. We'll happily sit at the table and figure out the best way to reduce emissions in a way that doesn't disrupt the economy. And I've heard the word disruption a lot today. What we're really talking about is re-ruption. We're already disrupted. We're re-ruptured, and we need to fix that.
I appreciate that answer, especially as you remind us that you make all things, and making something requires energy. So it is acutely felt in the manufacturer's industry. My second question, Lance, is what sort of policy choices or decisions can best ensure that we retain and grow manufacturing in California?
I think it would start with one very simple thing that we've advocated. You mentioned it in my bio. We passed a manufacturer's investment credit for 2 legislative sessions, nearly unanimously the first time. There were only 3 no votes, and unanimously last session. And unfortunately, the governor vetoed the bill both times, indicating there's not enough money in California to support manufacturing, when 44 other states do. So we're an outlier, and if California's going to choose to be an island rather than an oasis, we've got to get that figured out, because the other states are supporting manufacturing, which creates a leakage situation where people leave. A way to move forward is to sit down with manufacturing and say, what can we do and when can we do it, and how can we do it together? Those 3 questions is the answer that can get us to the future. Because while the problems may be very complex, I'm going to posit that the solutions are actually very simple. We're making it harder on ourselves than we need to do, and it's a matter of sitting down and talking and finding out, how are we going to get there? The university system is doing a great job through academia to identify ways and timeframes to get there. Let's listen to that, rather than the political rhetoric that unfortunately fills the Capitol, here in California, but also nationally, because at the end of the day, we will all be the victims of that.
Thank you for that practical approach and the thought about the solutions. Anna, you have a sweeping experience of state government and finance in action, and I know this subject is not new to you, or any facet of it. One challenge that we've heard through this day has been that there are many different agencies involved in the energy transition. And from your perspective and with your experience in the governor's office and leading Department of Finance, how can the state best improve the coordination of the transition to make sure that we deliver on target or close to target?
I think there are a lot of agencies, and some folks talk about reorganizations as different ways of being able to do things differently. And I tend to think about it more about how do you create a clear sense of purpose, what are we trying to get done, and how do we move quickly. And one of the things that I was proud of was opportunity to be part of state government and government broadly during the COVID epidemic, and looking at the speed with which folks were able to move on a variety of things. And part of that comes from really being very clear around what we need to get done, and how do we move forward to do it. What problem are we actually solving for, and what can actually help us get there. Seeing some folks in this room that were part of efforts of all hands on deck coming together to close what was at that point in time a 10 to 15% gap in how much power we needed to be able to keep the power on, and Nora and Lance and others that were part of that effort. The extent to which over a 5-day period folks worked on things to be able to shift our demand, to increase our capacity, and close what was projected at that point in time to be like a 12% gap in our generation, to be able to keep the power on while kids were home and not at school was pretty remarkable. So I guess part of what you can look at this in a variety of different ways. You can think about reorganizations, you can think about different approaches, but to me, it's around being really, really clear around what we're trying to get done, really focus on what problem we're trying to solve for, and everyone kind of leaning in on what is the thing that actually helps us be able to get it done, and moving all the obstacles that need to be moved to be able to get there together.
Thank you, and I know that you have pointed out that we have the ability. We have demonstrated experience in doing exactly that, and doing it in a short period of time, and doing it where everyone knew what was going on. And so it's clear we have the ability to do that, and we do, as has been stated here, seek some clarity on who's at the table and what the plan is. But you've certainly, there's the optimism as we have done this before, and it can be done. These are general questions now to all of you, and so I'll ask the same one and start with you, Lorena. What would you say has been the energy transition's most significant impact on our state?
Well, that's kind of tough. The most, I think we've led the way, right? And when we talk about renewables and what's possible, large-scale renewables, until this administration, of course, at the federal level that is trying to take us backwards. California showed that it was, in fact, possible. Those days when we hit 100% renewable energy on the grid, like that was thought of as some pie in the sky, I think, when we started a lot of this. I think, though, it has, unfortunately, because we have been so really innovative in our approach towards renewable and on the road prior to this administration at the federal level to doing much more, offshore wind or hydrogen. that because it's California, we've made ourselves a target now, and we're having some irrational conversations at the national level about what renewable energy should look like and what it should be. So we're kind of, we've gone so far, and yet now we're facing the tailwinds of it being looked at like a California thing or a progressive thing rather than just a practical thing that we need to do for our country, for our state, and kind of getting that backlash now. But we've shown that, in fact, we can transition.
As is pointed out too, right, we achieved one of our first goals early, 6 years early. So to Anna's point, to your point, that's right. So Lance, what would you say has been the energy transition's most significant impact on our state?
I think the fact that we're having a conversation about one. I mean, that really is at the center of the whole thing. We're talking about it, and we're wanting to do, excuse me, those things over the course of time. That's the best part. And I think to kind of distill down maybe what all of the panels have been talking about today, if we can pull off a reliable, affordable, sustainable power grid between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m., we will have probably solved most of these problems, because everything is rolled up in that critical time period, as Anna was talking about. That's when we're asked to shut manufacturing facilities. And I'd often get the question, how long will it take you to call your members and shut things down? And without being flippant and just being really accurate, take us a month. Because processes are involved. And I worked for a beer company, as I mentioned before, in the brownouts in 2002. Miller Brewing Company lost 30,000 gallons of beer one afternoon. And if that isn't a tragedy, I don't know what is. So we need to manage the grid. If we can accomplish just that 4-hour window going forward, all of the other problems would kind of flow from that. But having the discussion about what that future looks like, I think is really the best thing that we've contributed in.
Thank you. Anna?
I think we've contributed to a lot of innovation and thinking about, for example, what California's moves have done for the build out of the solar industry and the development of the technology, the development of the approach to be able to do it and substantially bring down the cost has been pretty remarkable. I'm always in awe of what we can accomplish when we focus the mind and we all pull together around trying to figure out what's the best path that can actually work.
I agree, and I think at this point too, it's been referred to as mid-transition. And I think that is kind of a responsible thing to always look along the way for self-assessment, and we are at mid-transition, and there are challenges as have been described here. But then again, California has shown an ability to respond. My next question is about this report. There's a report from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab estimates that the national energy demand for data centers, so the national energy demand for data centers will double or triple in 3 years, largely due to, no surprise, to AI. So with the Bay Area and other parts of California expected to drive the innovation in AI and job growth in the rise of AI, how can California meet this increased energy demand without placing an undue burden on existing ratepayers, the state's energy system, or businesses? Is that even possible? How can we address that?
Well, we have to first of all, it's not just energy, it's water as well. And we know two things that we are sensitive to in California, energy and water. But this is a good question, and I think it's a question that has to keep being presented to our legislature. In one hand, the same legislators and politicos, if you will, that have pushed a 100% renewable grid, who have pushed really decreasing emissions, is the same set who are pushing for this kind of unbridled AI tech extravaganza. The fact that that's in conflict so rarely gets brought up. And I think the first thing we have to do is be honest with ourselves. There are costs to this tech explosion, and the costs to the environment are very real. I battle this every day when it comes to jobs and trying to get some smart guardrails around AI and tech and having honest conversations so that we don't just basically allow something to come forward and not think about the ultimate consequences of that. And the consequences are in energy as well. So I think it starts with having a discussion that nobody's having. Do we have, I mean, I'm not an energy expert, and I'm a workforce expert, right? Do we have a way to produce enough renewable energy for data centers and enough water? I don't know. I question that because I was in the legislature during a time that we're ensuring we have enough energy and water for people who live in California. So I think it's a question that is necessary to keep being brought up because it's one that policymakers don't want to talk about, quite frankly, because the cost, both, obviously I deal with the cost on jobs and other guardrails, but the cost on the environment is extraordinary. And we have to, in California, I think one of the big things too is to quit thinking like, we're our own island, right? Like, oh, well, the data centers can be put, as we saw kind of this push to put some data centers or some really high water usage and energy usage in Arizona, you know? The border is artificial, right? And so when we're talking about emissions and the problems that come along with it, we're not preventing it from being in California by simply saying, well, so what, we can't do it here, we can do it right across the border in Arizona or Mexico or wherever else we choose. So I don't have an answer, but I think highlighting the issue is what's most important because it's not being addressed.
Thank you, and that's a really important issue, I want to say. We know we have some high school students who will be living that very challenge. So Lance, same question to you.
The short answer is we can't. So we can't manage that capacity requirement in California. At the heart of it is the lack of infrastructure. So I'm going to also throw something out to the group that California is 40 million people that's living in an infrastructure that's built for maybe 20 million people. Water, roads, highways, the grid, all of those things are based on a much smaller subset than what we have in California today. And I don't need to tell you that. If you drove today, you live that. And if we can't keep the lights on, again, paradoxical to be in the fourth largest economy, though, we have some infrastructure problems that prevent us from being a candidate for not only data centers, but even locating a new manufacturer to the state of California. It's very difficult. The boardrooms around the country and world, they're not looking at California as a possible location. Whereas 20, 30 years ago, it was the location. Even though it's warm today, we have the best weather in the world here in California. And I'm fearful that that's all we're going to be left with if we don't start addressing the issues as they are, because we won't be able to have nice things. And a data center, is a nice thing. If we're going toward the AI evolution that we are, we have to be ready for it, or we'll get left behind. And what a sad state of affairs for the Golden State to be left behind on something so important as really what the future is. And the future is computing and data and managing that. That takes an inordinate amount of energy. And I think from a scale perspective, we would all struggle with trying to get our minds around how much energy is needed to run a data center. It would boggle all of our minds.
Right, and here we are creating it, thinking about it, but can't execute it. But I wanted to ask you one other question, Lance, related to this, because we have high school students, and many of this room understand, well, when we can't build it in California, what that means. Can you unpack that a little bit for our students?
That if we can't make it here?
Why when you say in boardrooms, we're not looking at California because it can't be built here. Why is that?
Okay, so I wanted to start today by saying I'm only going to talk to the students today. You all can listen, but I'm addressing to the students. What we've created, and you'll all relate to this, what I'll call dangerous game of Jenga. That's our economy. And it's Jenga because we have layered regulations on top of one another as opposed to side by side and complementing. So if all the pieces of wood for Jenga were laid out on the floor, nothing would crash, right? But we've stacked them up. And now we're at the spot of pulling the pieces out. And sooner or later, the Jenga is going to come crumbling down. So that's the imagery that I want you to focus on. But we have a solution. We have solutions. We have opportunities to fix it if we stop talking past one another. And I used that phrase at a previous conference. And our sector has been guilty of that too. We've been talking past others over the course of time. We can't do that anymore. We cannot afford to, because with AI and data, things are happening so much faster that the old days, that could take a month, it could take 5 years or 10 years. We might only have 5 minutes to process things. So California has the opportunity, but do we have the will and do we have the moxie to make it happen? And I'm looking at this freshman class that just got elected, 30 new legislators that won't be able to run for re-election in 2036. So all of these things that we've been talking about today in terms of timeframes, they'll have to solve. Existing legislators that were in office, or previously, they're going to be gone. We're talking 3 governors from now in 2036. So we have to work together to make sure that the high school students have a job and an opportunity, so they don't have to move somewhere else to find that job and that opportunity. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I came to Sac State, and I've been in Sacramento ever since. Everyone should have that opportunity to stay here if you can or want to. I mean, you're not forced to stay here, but it's a darn good place, California, I'll tell you that.
Same question, Anna, about how can California meet this increased energy demand for AI without placing an undue burden on existing ratepayers or the energy system?
So I had a good opportunity to work on kind of this question on a study a couple of years ago, and basically make it a lot easier to build, right? Just certainty is one important element. So right now we have not yet defined, we know that we have to get something that does what gas does in our system today, and we have not yet defined what are the energies that are going to be eligible for the things that are not like our 60%. What is clean that is not current, reliable portfolio standard? When there's not clarity around that, it's really hard to raise money to be able to build it, and the money you can get is very expensive. Second piece, when we think about good jobs, infrastructure jobs traditionally have been very good jobs. Siva spoke to what we're going to need to be able to power our transition, not only from the energy sector, but from what the energy sector does for the rest of achieving our net neutrality, right? Like the whole transition is predicated on being able to move to clean energy electrification and having sufficient energy capacity to be able to do that. The amount of building that we have to do is massive. Nice thing around kind of when we evaluated it is, good news is we have enough land and we have enough water to be able to power the grid that we think we're going to need. What do we not have? The pace of building that is associated with what we're going to need to be able to do that. We know how to build things, and we know how to build things quickly, but some of the things that we see other folks doing is you take more of a master plan approach where you kind of decide over time what's going to go where, and how do we accelerate and cut some of those pieces. How can we do some of our work as like a workforce-wide type of effort where you can have longer-term training programs to be able to make sure we have all the people for all of the things. How do we help with how can we be, instead of having an approach where I can only go out and buy something the moment that I need to interconnect it, how do we know ahead of time so that we can end up doing more purchasing at scale? And so it went through a lot of the different kinds of actions that are tried and true in a variety of different places for how can you build things far more quickly than we do today. But it requires clarity, choices, and kind of having a clear certainty so that folks can raise money and spots to be able to do long-term planning and moving. So anyway, for what it's worth, for any interested takers, it was a helpful thing to work on. And one of the things that I was appreciated about it is that there are no constraints that were identified that are ones that we cannot affect. All of them are within the scope of the things that we can affect. But we got to move.
So we have a plan, we have demonstrated agency, we know we have industry in California, so I hate to be blunt, but where's the plan? I mean, that's what's interesting to me today is listening to we need a plan. And I thought, we're mid-transition, where is the plan?
So there are some elements, for example, right, there's been a lot of work around trying to get to longer term, more clear, where does all the transmission going to go? So that then when you know where the transmission is going to be, then you can more rapidly be able to do some of the overall connection. But to your point, I think one of the things that we sometimes that we've kind of learned a bit through this process is we tend to do a lot of planning for 2045, and we tend to do a lot of planning with a greater level of precision for the next 24, 36 months. We don't do a whole lot on how are we going to get between here and there, which is the piece that we got to get sharper on to be able to move faster and to make sure that things, kind of tie out and connect from here to there.
Thank you. It makes sense. I'm going to sort of shift a little bit here to talk about the work of the PPIC Economic Policy Center, led by Dr. Sarah Bone, often underscores the diversity of California's labor market and the industry mix across the state's region. Right? California is a big state. The regions have their own distinct personalities and culture. So how can state leaders ensure that the energy transition and the economic opportunities related to it doesn't leave any regions behind? Lorena?
Well, I think that's something we have been working on and has been forefront of a lot of the discussions, right? And we were able to, in certain areas of the state, in fact, put like large-scale solar that maybe didn't have, at least in the construction, didn't have the jobs to begin with. We're looking still at lithium coming out of Imperial County, which desperately needs jobs. So I think just the given what is necessary. When we start talking about offshore wind, we're looking at building out the Humboldt port. There's a lot of opportunity for places that we don't normally think of as job centers. And we have to continue down that path to ensure that those promises are realized. But we also need to make sure, and I think this is one of the things, obviously, representing labor unions that I care about, is making sure as we're planning in those areas that we're not cutting short people's expectations for a good job. So we often talk about well, of course that you need more money to live in LA or in the Bay Area. But as we continue to push out the renewable energy into areas that might have even been relying on fossil fuels in a previous generation, right? Bakersfield, I'm thinking of. We have to make sure that the jobs we're putting in there are subject to the same kind of standards as those that existed before and those that never existed but exist in other parts of the state. So jobs with a collective bargaining agreement, with good wages, with health care, with a pension, with retirement security, enough that people can actually self-sustain, not just, oh, there's a cheaper part of the state, we can put something there and not pay people as much. And so.
Those are really good points, and I'm glad to hear that people are thinking about that. Lance, what do you think about how can state leaders ensure the transition doesn't leave regions behind?
If we would embrace the concept that a job knows no boundaries, gender or color, that'd be a really good start. Because you can have a good job anywhere in this state, as big as it is, if it's the right job. And the right jobs are those that contribute to the economy and the community. And surprise, those are manufacturing jobs. They're literally at the heart of the economy. They provide opportunity. And without that economic freedom, that you don't have the freedom. You're beholden to something else. And we are the sector that can provide that. And there are stories of people going from the shop floor to the C-suite. That happens. But it doesn't happen in other sectors. But it can happen in manufacturing. And there is so much political discourse about manufacturing. I love it. I think when Governor Newsom debated Governor DeSantis, he led with California's dominating manufacturing. My phone blew up. That's great. But I know that we're not because we have so many more things that we can do. But people are talking about it. And they're talking about it for a reason, because it's a good job. And I shared with you, Tony, in an earlier conversation, when I worked for Miller Brewing Company, I'd go visit the brewery down in Irwindale. A few hundred employees working there. There are boats, trucks, nice cars, Harleys in the parking lot. And those were the men and women working on the brewery floor. Show me another sector that can do something like that. And once we all embrace it and society embraces it, we'll start to see some change. But in my humble opinion, the best job in California is a job in the manufacturing sector.
Thank you, Lance. Anna, what about the regions?
I think there can be a lot of, I go back to what's the level of building, what's the level of investment, what are the opportunities to be able to make our transition, and how to do that in a way that is thoughtful. And sometimes I think we think about kind of climate and economic opportunity as things that are kind of at odds with each other. And my mind, it's actually quite a lot of opportunity to think about how do we do things that are helpful for both of those bottom lines and for that intersection. And when we think about what we're going to need to invest to be able to fuel our system and our and our energy and our transition, I think it's a huge opportunity to think about how do we do that in a way that expands opportunity across the state. And we need land, we need space, we need stuff to be able to do this. So I think it can actually be a way of being able to help lift up more regions and not the opposite.
Thank you. And part of that lifting up the regions and ensuring that we have land and space, I think, is the thought about the educational aspects of what our state leaders can or are they doing to ensure that California's educational institutions up through high schools and community colleges are doing something with workforce training to prepare workers for this shift in our thinking, in our way of living, in our manufacturing. What should our state leaders be doing and thinking in terms of that kind of educational institutions and training systems?
I mean, I'm a believer in joint labor management apprenticeship programs. Make no mistake, we talk a lot about how much a college education, a traditional college education, if you will, can cost individuals as far as putting them in debt, maybe coming out with a degree that doesn't actually lead to a specific job. Where our joint labor management apprenticeship programs are completely free to the student. We have some in some pre-apprenticeship in the high schools. We do have some that are connected with our community colleges. But we have an aging workforce when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to energy, when it comes to the building of things. And we need to really highlight and uplift those apprenticeship programs and opportunities for students and giving them a path. I often say, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where it was, especially in the Latino community, was go to college, right? You got to go to college, you got to go to college, you got to go to college. And it wasn't until much later after, I went and I realized I could have gone through an IBW apprenticeship, ended up with less debt and more money. And I think that we need to ensure that young people have those opportunities in every part of the state. And it'd be remiss to say the way that we ensure that there is a pipeline, the way the apprenticeship works is to ensure that there are project labor agreements and community benefit agreements on the project in existence. We need a pipeline because you can't just put people through the training program and have no job for them to go to. In fact, during the training program is when they get that hands-on experience, get paid to actually learn, right? Get paid to be an apprentice. And in a first period apprentice, second period apprentice, and eventually get to a journey level standard. Well, in order to continue to employ them, we also need those journey level jobs. And so we need the agreements in place, the collective bargaining agreements through the trades, which are project labor agreements, obviously, or sometimes skilled and trained. We have different ways of calling them, but we need that end result in order to provide the opportunity for more and more young people to go through the apprenticeship program.
So I want to follow up on that because I know that a lot of young people hear about the community college transition to a university or straight from high school to a university and the requirements that are attached there too. Can you tell us a little bit about how you find out about an apprenticeship program? Well,
you can always come to our website, unitescalifornia.org, and a lot of people do. About half the visits to our website is trying to get them to the right apprenticeship program. There are the trades in different areas. I know a local high school has an MC3, which is the trades pre-apprenticeship program to lead young people, to expose them to all the different trades and lead them into it. It is a little difficult if you've never really thought through it, right? Like, what apprenticeship? Do you want to be an electrician? Do you want to be a welder? Do you want to be a pipe fitter? Do you want to be a sheet metal worker? And you may not even know, our young people don't even know necessarily what those jobs entail. There are often exams, but we have a lot of programs as long as we have the placements available. We have ways to transition people into that. A lot of these apprenticeships are hooked up with our community colleges, so you can take some courses at the community college that counts for credit as well as the apprenticeship. And like I said, we have these pre-apprenticeship programs throughout the state, sometimes lined up with things like Youth Build or federal programs, sometimes lined up with community colleges and even high schools. But anybody can come to our website or the State Building Trades website and find out more, and we can help. I think more and more college counselors and teachers are becoming aware of these opportunities and hopefully educating themselves on how, if they have students who are interested, to get them on that path.
Thank you. So Lance, how about for manufacturers and preparing workers for the kinds of jobs that will be driving the state's future?
I think the best place to start is to recognize, and I went to an education conference and learned that most high school graduates don't go on to university. So most don't. So if we spent the amount of rhetoric and resources on the most, we wouldn't even be having to answer that question today, because there would be an opportunity and an offering to help the most that don't. And unfortunately, during COVID, we lost 2 graduating high school classes of California's population to something else, because there wasn't that next opportunity for them. So if we just pivoted and started having conversations about the most of the young people in California that don't go to college, that'd be a really good start, where they can come through programs like Lorena mentioned, come into the manufacturing rate, bring your skill and your desire to the workplace, and you can do great things. And that really is the future, because California shouldn't become a service economy. It should become a making economy. And the way to do that is to pivot that discussion. And I know I've thrown a few things out there, a few provocations, but I don't want you all to leave here thinking I'm the thorn between 3 roses, but it sure sounds that way. But we need to have some real conversations. I'm a first-generation college graduate in my family. First time I came to Sacramento State, barely made it through, but I did. And my daughter's doing her residency in Creighton University Medical Center right now as a doctor. So it can happen. But we need to have that opportunity available to everyone based on their skills and their desires. If you put a college or a student in college that's a square peg in a round hole, that's not going to be a good outcome. What did that student need to succeed? That's the kind of discussion that we need to have.
Right. No argument here, Lance. Thank you. So this is the last question for on. Then we're going to go to Q&A. So that is, again, same question, Anna. What can California's leaders do to ensure that our educational institutions and workforce training systems are preparing workers for this energy transition future, carbon neutral future?
I think some of the work that we need to do and some of the preparation of the workers, I agree with many of the good points made. So I guess I would go to a slightly different spot, which is also we probably need to continue being the folks doing the research and the folks figuring out the path for innovation. I think we also need to be folks who are thinking about the fact that the linear approach of, I go to school, I go to college, I do this, that, and the other thing may not necessarily make the most sense at the level of transition and economic path that we've got. So what are the different ways in which we make it easier for people to be able to get whatever is the training, the opportunity, the targeted skills that are needed for whatever is their next opportunity, and ability to be able to, to bounce back and forth and create, the efforts and the work in the community colleges around the conversation around credit for prior learning. How do I recognize what people know and the knowledge and that they come from activities that they've had to be able to give that some actual credit towards a degree, and look at what are the net and how do I do my program in a way that is different and that is more focused on what individuals need, how individuals learn, and how that ties into what we're doing as an economy is an interesting conversation that I think gives us some other pieces to focus on. I'm on the board of regents at the University of California, and one of the things that I think a lot about is that, right, institutions exist to provide a purpose, to serve a purpose of what it is that the people need, right? Like we all decide to be part of the process to be able to support this institution because the institution is here to deliver a good. The institution itself is not the good in of itself. So how do we think about the fact that, what is it that we're here to do? What purpose are we here to serve? And how do we change to be able to make sure that we continue to be focused on what we are here to do, which is about people, about opportunity, about the future of California. And that may look different than it did when I went to school way more years ago than it feels like it's been. It's 30.
No, you're right. There are different opportunities and different paths, and the end result is not the institution. It is what is it supposed to serve for that person. And I know a lot of us in this room probably grew up in households that said, because there was no education in our parents or relatives, it was college, 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 and very few other alternatives at that point. We've come to the end of our panel discussion and now open it up to the audience for Q&A. And so please, we have our PPIC runners, and they'll bring a microphone to you, and I see one hand up already. Thank you, Giselle, and please state your name, and if you're with an entity or agency, please say so.
I'm Kataslava Kat. You said about the unemployment crisis, so I'm unemployed and I recently graduated from high school. I have a big experience in engineering, electricity. I did robotics for 12 years and I'm willing to get a job in electricity. So my question is, how can I get a job in electricity and what government is doing to solve the unemployment crisis? If there is any programs for me?
I am sorry. I got, how can I get a job? And then,
In the energy transition.
can you repeat that at least for me?
How can I get a job in electricity? And what government is doing to solve an unemployment crisis? Is there any programs for me?
How can I get a job in the energy system?
I'm a recent graduate from high school.
And she's from high school.
In the energy sector.
Yes, how to get a job in the energy sector. Any suggestions?
I guess it depends what you want to do and how you want to do it. There's various points of entry. The utilities were here. They have their job websites. Lorena mentioned the apprenticeships. It depends what you're looking for.
I mean, there's everything from, apprenticeship with electricians union to apprenticeship actually with other types of work around. It depends, if you wanted to do utilities, solar obviously is there. Then there's like the university system, the university route. I just came from our UAW graduate students who are doing a ton of great research and really figuring out that innovative approach for the next generation as well. So there are a lot of things. And there's also office jobs within like the utilities. It's not just a hands-on, I'm going to be an electrician. There's call centers. There's a number of other ancillary jobs that are available in our utilities. Thank God in California are highly unionized and provide a really good career path no matter which job you choose throughout it.
I think it helps too to identify what interests you and then to go on a few websites as suggested to find out what interests you because you want to do work that you hopefully will find fulfilling and that you can do for some time and learn and build from. And there are a lot of opportunities, not only in the energy sector, but I think, as you've heard, the websites can be helpful. Thank you. I think I heard you just say it's hard to get a job even with people who have four-year degrees and who've been out of work for some time. And California does have one of the highest unemployment rates and things are difficult. But I think entrees are via websites in the application process. So best wishes to you on that job search. Yes, Giselle?
This is Ms. Wilson from Best Health and Wellness. I want to say thank you, Chief Justice. That was an amazing question about what's the plan. And so far as going forward, we've been trying to get renewable energy since the 1930s and try to get ourselves off of fossil fuel, trying to diversify our economy. Now we're at a point where we're having to fight the rest of the nation about our energy independence and what we're seeking. How do we keep ourselves from being burnt out with the, renewable energy plan that we've been doing for the last 100 plus years. 100 plus years. How do you keep that momentum to go? And like you said, to reach our 2045 plan and goals.
Mm-hmm. How do we keep our momentum going?
I'd like to start, and I should have suggested this earlier, that let's look at those dates again. And let's see if they make sense. The direction we have all agreed to, But if it's going to cost us, and I'll just use some rounded figures, $100 billion more to meet a goal of 2030 or even in 2045, let's rethink that, because we'll be pulling that amount of money out of the economy to great detriment. Let's just have that conversation. But we're barreling towards things full steam ahead, and I hesitated to use the Titanic reference, but full steam ahead, when we know that we're going to have extreme difficulty getting there, and it's going to come at great cost. And it was posited earlier today that corporations should and could pay. Well, society pays. So if society is going to be affected by it, let's have a social discourse about what that future looks like. And if we put on the ballot, voter X, if you thought it's going to cost you $1,000 more in your utility bill every month to meet this objective, I'm not sure that would pass based on the survey work that Mark has done.
Mm-hmm. Right. We have an online question.
Thanks, Tani. And this picks up a little bit on an earlier question and also a comment that Lorena made earlier. So California's economy continues to have some of the highest unemployment rates in the nation. PPIC's recent report on energy sector jobs noted the impact California's goals were having in California on older workers, particularly in the Central Valley. How realistic is it to retrain these workers for new high technology jobs?
Thank you.
Well, we've been obsessed with the idea of retraining workers and upskilling. That's a little derogatory of a term, I think, but workers in this sector. And I think what was brought up about the dates, and I'll be the first to say I was a legislator, bought all in, let's do it. Probably talk to Anna sometimes about because we had a governor who wanted these dates, and was it scientific? Probably not, right? We pushed for it. And I think that that's important, and kind of goes to how do we keep going? We have to keep going, right? It gets hotter every year. I balance this every day of my life. Yes, maybe maybe we have to pay too much, but maybe we don't want to burn up as a ball in the sun. I mean, there's a lot of urgency, realistic urgency that I think is being ignored right now, that we lived with about 5 to 8 years ago. We were really into that urgency, right? So there's a right sizing that needs to be done. And I think sometimes our aging workforce, if we looked at it more like we are not getting rid of for some of those Central Valley jobs, if you will, our refinery jobs, this is big on ours, we're not to the point where we're going to not need oil, right? We're not there. So what do we do to allow people the dignity of finishing out their career where they are, what they're skilled at doing, what they can do, what's a good middle-class job for them, and letting them retire with dignity, rather than pushing this idea that we're going to suddenly make you a solar installer, right? It's not realistic. It's not righteous. It's not something we want to do to workers. And to be honest, I think there's a better way for us to approach our energy independence and our renewable goals and standards in a way that allows people who are in the industry now to retire with dignity when they're at the age of retirement. And so I don't think we accepted, kind of because we had this urgency that I think was real. And I think Jerry Brown in particular would say things that made us feel like we have to do it, we have to do it, we have to do it, right? Like his clock, and if he ever got called down, like I did, to help pass cap and trade, and then got the whole lecture on what's going to happen to our world if we don't do something right now. That's all right. He was correct, and I think we're correct in having that urgency, but we can right-size it now, and it'll allow for that transition, I think, which is a true transition, because every time we've had elected officials and others talk about a just transition, that has been kind of BS, right? And it's really left workers with a lot of anxiety because there is no justice in what they were looking for, transition. We want people to have dignity.
Mm-hmm. I want to say to your point, too, about the momentum. I think it's always a wise move in momentum to stop and self-assess, and I think we're at that point. This is an inflection point for California. We're hearing it in the legislative oversight hearings. We're hearing it and listening it to the governor's plan to Seva Gunda about trying to rethink bringing in and maintaining a more hospitable environment for the refineries. We are at an inflection point, and I think it was Peter and Andy who said in the prior panel, It will take a palette of energy resources. We're not ready to kick fossil fuel out. We still want to have heat and light in the evening. So we do know that this is a transition, and it is everyone still. It is still a palette of options because we're not ready to do any one thing. And I think we hear it quite often, and I've heard the governor say it in his state of the state. It's like, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go with everyone else. And I think there's something to that we're hearing today. So we still have the momentum, but we want to be smart about that momentum. We are at the end of our time today. I thank you for your attention, your presence. Let's do a big round for this panel. Two things before you get up from your chair. Like PPIC, this is one of our first endeavors to keep you this long on a day. So we will be sending you a survey to find out how you thought, what we could do in the future, what interested you. And we also, the second piece is we have light refreshments over here to reward you for your day of concentration. Thank you very much.
Thank you.